Picture the sun, not sunset, not sunrise, the actual midday sun high in a cloudless sky in the middle of summer. Now imagine you can stare directly at it. No squinting, no pain, no burning spots dancing in your vision afterward. Just a pale, bluish disk hanging up there like a coin seen through dirty water. Imagine that disk casting shadows so weak you can barely find your own on the ground at noon. Imagine frost forming on bean plants in July. Imagine bread made from ground bark and dried grass because the wheat never turned gold, because nothing turned gold that year, because gold requires sunlight and the sunlight simply stopped arriving. That's the year 536. The worst year to be alive in recorded human history. Not the plague year, though the plague was coming. Not a war year, though the wars were coming too. Just the year the sky broke, quietly, without explanation, over the heads of millions of people who had no way of knowing what had happened, no way of knowing when it would end, and no way of knowing that most of the suffering was still ahead of them. Somewhere on the other side of the world, a volcano had torn itself apart and thrown enough ash and sulphur into the upper atmosphere to dim the sun across the entire Northern Hemisphere for 18 months. Nobody in Europe knew that. Nobody in Europe would know that for 1,400 years. All they knew was that in late winter the sun grew weak and stayed weak, and the world got cold, and the crops died, and God had apparently stopped listening. We're going back there tonight, not as historians reading tree rings and ice cores. We're living it. One person, one farm, one endless dim year in northern Italy, in the marshy flatlands outside the imperial city of Ravenna, in a world that still calls itself Roman, even though Rome hasn't ruled itself in 60 years. Everything they would have seen, smelled, feared, and survived. Or not survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly, I still don't know if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just lying in the dark listening to descriptions of famine bread and frozen vineyards, for reasons neither of us wants to examine too closely. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable, pull the blanket up. Here we go. Your eyes open in darkness, and something is wrong before you're even fully awake. It takes you a moment to understand what it is. It's not a sound. The farmhouse is quiet, just the breathing of the others and the shifting of the animals through the wall. It's not a smell, though the smells are all there, the same as every morning. Wood smoke gone cold in the hearth. Damp wool from 6 people sleeping in one room. The sweet sour reek of the cattle byre pressed up against the other side of the wattle wall, dung and warm hide and wet straw. The sharp animal smell of your own body, which hasn't been properly washed since the autumn, because who strips down and washes in a Po Valley winter? All of that is normal. All of that is home. What's wrong is the cold. It's the kind of cold that has weight. It's lying on your chest like a wet dog. Your nose is numb. The blanket over you, coarse wool patched twice, shared with your younger brother, has a stiffness at the edge where your breath has been freezing against it all night. Freezing inside the house. And here is the thing your half-asleep mind is struggling with. The thing that will not resolve. The thing that makes your stomach tighten before you've even sat up. It is the end of March. Welcome to the year 536, in the countryside south of Ravenna, in the kingdom of the Ostrogoths, in what everyone still stubbornly calls Italy, in a world that is about to find out what happens when the sun stops working. Your name is Paulus. You're 16 years old. You were born on this farm, in this room, probably on this exact packed earth floor, the second son of a tenant family that has worked this same soggy, stubborn, beautiful land for 4 generations. Your people are colony, tenant farmers, bound to the estate of a Gothic lord you've seen exactly twice in your life, both times at a distance, both times on a horse worth more than everything your family owns. You don't own the land, you don't own the house. You own 2 tunics, a knife, a pair of boots your father made, and your hands. Your hands are your inheritance. They are already, at 16, cracked and calloused and shaped like your father's. You lie there for another moment in the dark, listening. Your brother Eustace, 10 years old, is a furnace of heat against your back, the only warm thing in the world. Across the room your father is already moving. You can hear him. The creak of the bedboards, the wet rasp of his cough, which arrived in December and never left, the scrape of flint against iron as he tries to wake the fire. Spark, 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 a red glow, the smell of smouldering tinder fungus, then burning straw, then the first crackle of split alder catching. Light crawls up the walls, and now you can see your own breath, hanging in the air of the room like smoke, in a house with a fire in it, at the end of March, in Italy. Your father sees it too. He doesn't say anything. He's 41 years old, which makes him an old man here, and he has learned that most things aren't improved by talking about them. But you see him look at the breath fog, and then look at the shuttered window where the thinnest grey line of morning is showing through the crack, and you see something move across his face that you have never seen there before. Not worry. You've seen worry. Worry is the river rising. Worry is a sick ox. Worry is the rent collector coming early. This is something underneath worry. This is a man looking at the light coming through a crack in a shutter and not recognizing it. Because the light is wrong. It has been wrong for 8 days now. And today, you're going to have to go outside and stand in it again. You get up because there is no version of this life where you don't get up. The floor bites your bare feet through the rushes. You dress standing as close to the fire as you can get without your father elbowing you away from the pot. Wool tunic over the linen one you slept in. The wool is cold and slightly damp because everything is slightly damp, because this whole country between the Apennines and the sea is half water, drained marsh and river silt and ditches your great-grandfather dug, and the damp gets into everything: cloth, bread, bone. You wrap strips of cloth around your lower legs and bind them with cord, working by feel, your fingers clumsy with cold, the cord rough against the chilblains on your knuckles. The chilblains are new this year. You never used to get them past February. Now it's almost April and the backs of your hands are cracked and itching, and one split near your thumb weeps a little every time you grip anything. You grip things all day. That's the job. That's the whole job. Breakfast is what breakfast always is. A lump of yesterday's bread, dense as river clay, softened in a bowl of hot water with a little salt, and this morning, because your mother is worried about your father's cough, a spoonful of the good lard. The bread is spelt and barley mixed, coarse enough that you can feel individual husks against your teeth. You eat it standing up. You always eat it standing up. Sitting is for the evening meal, when the day's work is behind you and can't be stolen from you anymore. You eat fast the way everyone in your family eats, hunched slightly over the bowl, one arm half curled around it. Nobody here has ever had food taken off them at this table. The arm curls anyway. That's 4 generations of memory in a posture. Some things the body knows without being told. Your mother is up now, and the baby, and your grandmother is stirring on her pallet by the fire, complaining before her eyes are even open, which is how you know she's alive. 6 people in one room, plus the animals through the wall. Their heat, one of the reasons the house is built this way. Cattle on one end, people on the other, a shared roof, and a shared winter. In a normal year, by the end of March, the cattle would be out on the new grass already, and the house would feel enormous. There is no new grass. That's the first thing you see when you push the door open and step out into the yard. You see it every morning now, and every morning it lands on you again like a hand on the back of your neck. The pasture beyond the ditch should be green. Not lush, not yet, but green. That first thin, bright green that comes up in early March. The green the whole year is built on. Instead, it's the colour of an old man's beard. Grey-brown, flattened, with rims of white frost along every blade and every furrow, and the frost isn't melting, because the thing in the sky that is supposed to melt it has stopped doing its job. And now you look up, because you can't not look up, because for 8 days every person in this valley has been looking up the way you probe a bad tooth with your tongue. The sun is above the tree line in the east. You know it's the sun because of where it is and because there's nothing else it could be. It looks like the moon. Actually, no. You've thought about this standing in this yard on other mornings. The moon has more dignity. The moon is supposed to be pale. This is the sun, the actual sun, the thing you've been forbidden to look at directly your entire life, and you're looking directly at it. Both eyes open, no pain, and it hangs there behind what looks like a veil of dirty milk. A flat disc with a strange bluish cast like tarnished silver, like a dead man's eye. The sky around it isn't cloudy. That's the part your mind keeps sliding off. There are no clouds. The sky is a whitish, brownish, luminous haze from horizon to horizon, and the light coming out of it is the light of late evening at an hour past dawn, and your shadow on the frozen mud of the yard is so faint you have to move your arm to be sure it's yours. 8 days. 8 days it's been like this. The first morning people laughed about it. Strange weather. Sea fog come inland, someone said, though the sea fog never looked like this and never lasted past noon. The second and third days, the priest at the estate chapel said a mass, and everyone came, even the men who normally have to be dragged. By the 5th day, your grandmother had stopped talking about it entirely, which frightened you more than anything anyone had said, because your grandmother has an opinion about everything, and the only thing she refuses to discuss are the things she's decided are omens. Yesterday, Gundilla the steward rode through the tenant farms and told everyone the same thing, in his blunt soldier's Latin with its Gothic edges. The frost will pass, the ploughing will not wait, the Lord's fields get worked first, same as every year, and any man who lets fear make him idle will answer to the Lord's account book, which fears nothing. So today you plough, you collect what needs collecting. The ox goad from beside the door, a long hazel rod, its end polished dark by your father's hand and your grandfather's before that. The bag with the noon bread. You pull on the felted wool cap your mother made, tug it down over your ears, and cross the yard to the byre. And here at least, inside the animal wall, the world still smells the way the world is supposed to smell. Warm dung and hay dust, and the huge grassy breath of the 2 oxen, brown and old brown, which is what you've called them since you were 4 and nobody ever improved on it. You lean your forehead against Brown's neck for a moment, one hand flat on the warm hide, feeling the slab of muscle underneath, the slow furnace of the animal's body. He turns his head, breathes at you, a great wet gust of hay-smelling air. The oxen aren't afraid of the sky. You've checked. The dogs howled the first 2 nights and then stopped. The chickens have gone strange, laying badly, going to roost in the middle of the afternoon when the dim light dims further. But the oxen just eat and pull and eat. There's a comfort in that you couldn't explain to anyone. You yoke them in the half-light, and this is all hands, all habit, done 10,000 times. The wooden yoke lifted, its weight familiar as your own arm, up over Brown's neck. The bow slid under his throat and pinned. Then old Brown backing into place with the resigned patience of an animal that has done this longer than you've been alive. The second bow, the pins, the chain to the plough's beam, your cracked thumb catching on the cold iron of the chain hook. A bright little jab of pain, a bead of blood you wipe on your thigh. The iron is so cold it burns. In March, everything you touch this morning takes a little heat out of you and gives none back. Your father comes out coughing, spits, looks at the sun without expression, and the two of you walk the oxen out of the yard and down the lane between the ditches, toward the Lord's big field by the river, your breath and the oxen's breath making a small travelling cloud around you. The frozen mud ridges cracking like thin pottery under the animals' hooves, and the whole way, neither of you says a single word about the light. There's nothing to say about it. It's wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong. Talking about it doesn't make the plough move. But here is what you don't know yet. Walking down that lane, 16 years old, cold hands, blood on your thigh, a whole life planned out in your head in its small way. You don't know that this is not 8 strange days. You don't know that the sun will look like this, dim and blue and powerless for a year. More than a year. You don't know that the frost you're walking on is the first page of a famine that will empty whole villages between here and the mountains. You don't know that far away in Constantinople, a man named Procopius is writing down what he sees in the sky, calling it a most dread portent, saying the sun gives forth its light without brightness, like the moon during this whole year. You don't know that in Ravenna, 12 miles north of your cold feet, a Roman official named Cassiodorus is drafting a letter in beautiful anxious Latin, asking what it means that the sun has lost its wonted light, that the seasons seem to be all jumbled up together, that we see a blue-coloured sun and marvel at bodies which cast no midday shadow. You can't read. You will never read. But you are standing inside the sentence they are writing, and this is how you learn the first rule of the year, 536. The sky does not owe you anything. The Lord's field is 40 ugera of the best land on the estate, river silt, black and deep, drained by ditches that your family and the 6 other tenant families maintain with their own backs as part of the rent. In a normal year, ploughing it in late March is hard, good work. The soil turns off the ploughshare in long, moist slabs, dark as bread crust, and the smell that comes up out of opened earth in spring is one of the finest smells there is, cold and mineral and alive, and gulls follow the furrow screaming and dropping on the worms, and by midday you're working in your undertunic with your sleeves pushed up. Today the plough hits the ground and the ground says no. You feel it through the handles before you understand it. The share bites, skids, jumps. Your father, walking at the oxen's heads, feels the chain go slack and looks back. You bear down on the handles, put your whole weight into keeping the iron in the earth, and the plough bucks against you like a live thing, because the top 2 inches of this field that has fed people for 400 years, is frozen. Not deep frozen, not stone, but crusted, stiff, dead, and under the crust the soil is cold, wet clay that grabs the share and holds it. You plough anyway. Of course you plough anyway. You plough because Gundilla said plough, and because the seed spelt is waiting in the granary, and because if it doesn't go in the ground there is nothing, and nothing is not survivable. But it's brutal. The oxen lean into the yoke until you can see the muscles standing out along their haunches, their breath jetting, hooves tearing at the crust for purchase. Every 50 paces the share fouls with frozen clods and you have to stop. Kneel in the furrow and claw the iron clean with your bare hands, because the paddle can't get into the gap, and the clay is so cold it makes the bones of your fingers ache, a deep ringing ache like biting ice, and the split by your thumb opens again, and the mud gets into it and you stop feeling it after a while, which you know is not a good sign, and you keep going. By what should be mid-morning, the light has not strengthened at all. That's the thing about these days that gets inside people. There's no morning anymore, no noon, no golden slant of afternoon. There's just the same flat, brownish, shadowless twilight, hour after hour, so that time itself goes soft and you can't tell by the sky whether you've been working for 1 hour or 4. The church bell at the estate chapel rings the hours now with a new importance. People listen for it the way they never used to. When the sky stops telling you what time it is, a bell becomes a kind of mercy. You and your father work mostly in silence, but it's not empty silence. Every silence has something in it. This one has his cough in it, coming more often as the morning grinds on. A deep, wet, tearing sound that makes you keep glancing sideways at him, and it has the sound of the plough in it, the groan of the beam, the squeal of the chain, the rip and clatter of the share through crusted ground, and it has, underneath everything, like a held breath, the question that nobody in this whole valley is asking out loud. What if it doesn't come back? At the turn of the furrow, at the field's end nearest the river, old Severus is standing at the edge of his own strip, not working, just standing, which is itself a small scandal. Severus is the oldest man among the tenants, past 70, a leather-faced relic who claims to remember the last emperor in the West, claims it the way old men claim things, loudly and with details that change. He's leaning on his stick, looking at the sky, and as you bring the oxen around, he speaks without looking at you. I was alive when the Goths came, he says. I was alive for the hunger in the year the river drowned the whole lower estate. I have buried a wife and 4 children. I am not a man who frightens. You wait. The oxen stamp and steam. This frightens me, Severus says, and turns and walks back toward the houses, and you watch him go, and your father says quietly the first full sentence he's said all morning. Mind the furrow. You mind the furrow. Noon, or the bell that claims it's noon. You eat sitting on the plough beam with your back against Brown's warm flank, because the animal is the only warm surface in the visible world. The bread is cold and dense. You have a piece of cheese the size of 2 fingers, hard sheep's cheese with a rind you soften by holding it in your armpit while you eat the bread, an old field trick, and an onion, and river-cold water from the skin. Your hands are shaking slightly as you eat. The small tremble of muscles that have been gripping since dawn, and you watch the shake with a kind of detachment, flexing your fingers, feeling the stiffness in the tendons, the hot line of the reopened split, the deep cold that has moved into the joints and set up house there. 16 years old, and your hands ache like your grandmother's. That's the year 536 doing that. It's only March. It has barely started with you. Across the field, the other tenant teams are strung out in the dim light, each family on its section, oxen and bent men, and the whole scene has a strange underwater quality in the haze. Figures going grey with distance far sooner than they should, sounds arriving muffled and late. Somebody's plough chain snaps, and you hear the crack and then the cursing float across the dead air a full heartbeat afterward, thin and small like it's coming from another year. And it's at that moment, sitting on the plough beam with cheese in your armpit and your breath in a cloud in front of your face, that you notice the birds, or rather, you notice the absence. By late March, this river margin should be a riot. Larks going straight up out of the grass and singing on the way. Storks back from wherever storks go. Building on the granary roof, clattering their bills. Swallows over the ditches. This is a country of birds. The marshes to the north are so thick with them in spring that the fowlers of Ravenna sell duck for less than bread. The sky is empty. It has been empty for days, and you only now truly register it. No larks, no storks on the granary. A few crows, because crows attend all disasters. That's their profession. But the birds of spring have looked at this spring and refused it. They know something, you think, and then you make yourself stop thinking it, and you get up, and you swap the softened cheese rind into your mouth, and you take the handles, and your father clicks his tongue at the oxen, and the iron goes back into the ground that doesn't want it. You plough until the dim light dims further, which is the only sunset there is now, a gradual failure of an already failed sky. Walking back up the lane, the oxen slow and heavy ahead of you, you count the day's work like a man counting a bad harvest already. Perhaps 2/3 of what the same 2 men and the same 2 beasts turned last year. The seed will go in late. The seed will go into cold ground. And even as you think it, you understand, in the wordless way you understand weather and animals, that lateness is not really the problem. Seed is a promise the earth makes you. The earth keeps that promise with warmth and light. Look up. Go on. Look at what's up there. That dim blue coin sinking into the haze. What exactly is going to keep the promise now? At the yard gate your mother is waiting, which she doesn't usually do. And before she says anything, you know from the set of her shoulders that the day has one more thing in it. Gundula came, she says. All the tenants. Tomorrow, after Mass, he has word from Ravenna about the sky. Word from Ravenna, from the city, from the palace of the Gothic king and the offices of the Roman clerks, where they have books and learned men, and God presumably speaks more clearly than he does out here in the mud. That night, you lie under the stiff blanket with your brother's cold feet against your calves, listening to your father cough and the fire settle and a wind you don't like moving over the thatch, and you feel something you're too young to have a word for, though the word exists, and the men in Ravenna are writing it down in their letters at this very hour. The word is dread. Not fear. Fear has an object. Dread is what you feel when the object is the sky. The estate chapel is a small brick building with a floor of reused Roman tile, some pieces still showing fragments of an older mosaic, a dolphin's tail, a border of vines, the leftovers of some rich man's dining room that stood here 300 years ago, when this was a villa and the world was a different shape. You have knelt on the dolphin's tail your whole life. You will kneel on it this morning with about 90 other people, everyone the estate can produce packed in shoulder to shoulder, wet wool steaming faintly in the candlelight, because outside it is once again freezing, and once again the sun has come up like a sick lamp behind a curtain. 9th day, and the priest's voice has a thinness in it this morning that everyone hears and nobody mentions. After the Mass, in the yard before the chapel, Gundula. Understand what a steward is in this world. The lord of this estate is a Goth. a warrior aristocrat with lands in 3 districts, a man who attends the king in Ravenna and has probably not thought about your family in years, the way you don't think about individual bees. Between him and you stands Gundula, also a Goth, but a working one, a thick, weathered man of 50 who was a soldier once, walks with a stiff hip he got somewhere he doesn't discuss, and manages this estate the way he'd hold a bridge, with total humorless competence. He wears a sword. He's the only man in your daily world who does. He speaks Latin like a man chopping wood, and he is not cruel, which in a steward is worth more than kindness. He stands on the chapel step, and the yard goes quiet, and even the sky seems to lean in, dim and brown above the bare trees. You want to know what the city says about the sun, he says. No greeting. I'll tell you what the city says. The learned men have written to Rome. The churchmen say God is patient and we should be too. The king's officers say, and here something moves under his beard that might be contempt, that the seasons are disturbed and the treasury is aware of it. Silence. Somebody's baby fusses and is smothered against a shoulder. Now I'll tell you what I say, Gundula says. I say I've seen bad years. I fought 2 wars on an empty stomach. A bad year is a wolf. You don't argue with a wolf about whether it's fair. You get inside the walls and you count what you have. He lets that sit. So, every family will plant everything, every seed. The Lord's fields and your own strips both. The gardens too. Beans, vetch, roots, everything. And double what you'd normally sow of the beans, because beans forgive a cold summer better than wheat does. Whatever the sky decides, we will not be the fools who kept seed in a jar out of fear. A murmur, this is sense, and everyone knows it's sense, and there's a strange comfort just in hearing a man with a sword speak sense in complete sentences. Second thing, the ditches. If the summer is cold, it may also be wet, and if the drains fail on top of the rest, we lose everything twice. Ditch work doubles, starting after sowing. Yes, I know, he says, to the sound nobody quite made. Your backs will hurt less than your children's bellies. Third thing. He pauses, and this pause is different. And afterward you'll remember that the pause is when you first understood how serious it all was. More than the frost, more than the blue sun. Because Gundula was a man who never hesitated, and here he was hesitating. The Lord's household is moving to Ravenna for the season. I'm sending the wool clip and the last of the winter cheese to the city market, while prices are still ordinary. Because they will not stay ordinary. I need 2 carts and men for them. 4 days there and back through the marsh road. Paulus. Your own name lands on you like a dropped beam. Every face turns. Your father's chest is bad and everyone within a mile knows it. So he stays, and you go in his place with the 2nd cart. You've handled oxen since you could walk and you don't drink. A single dry note that might be humour. Yet, and that is how, at 16, in the dimmest spring in the history of springs, you find out you're going to see Ravenna. You have never been to Ravenna. This needs saying plainly. You have lived your entire life 12 miles from one of the most important cities on earth, the capital of Italy, seat of kings, treasure house of emperors, and you have never seen it, because you are a tenant farmer's son, and 12 miles is a working day, and the farm does not take days off. Ravenna, to you, is a direction. It's where the road goes. It's the place the rent goes, and the wool and the tithes, and it's the origin of everything that arrives from above. Laws, stewards, rumours, God's opinions, and now, apparently, explanations for the sky. or the absence of explanations. Your mother packs for you that evening as if you're going to war. Bread, hard cheese, a spare tunic, and, folded into a rag and pressed into your palm privately, 3 small silver coins, siliquae with the monogram of King Theodahad stamped on them, which represent a terrifying fraction of everything your family has. In the city, she says, salt if it's cheap, and a candle for St. Apollinaris, a real one, wax. She holds your face in both her hands for a moment, which she hasn't done in years, and her hands smell of onions and lard, and her eyes go over your face the way you'd check a tool before lending it out. Watch the light, she says, which makes no sense, and which you will think about for the rest of your life. You leave before the dim dawn of the 11th day, 2 carts, 4 oxen, 4 men, you and Ursus, the smith's son, a huge cheerful 19-year-old with hands like wooden mallets, and 2 older tenants, Faustinus and the quiet one everyone just calls the Dalmatian. The carts ride heavy, woolen sacks that give off their deep, greasy lanolin smell even in the cold, wheels of pale cheese packed in straw, and under the driver's board of your cart, wrapped in oiled cloth, a letter from Gundula to the Lord's household, which you carry with the solemnity that would embarrass you if anyone could see inside your head. The road north runs on a causeway between 2 worlds. To your left, ploughed land, hedges, the low line of the Apennine foothills far away, everything grey-brown and frost-rimed and wrong. To your right, beginning almost at the roadside ditch and running east of the sea, the great marshes, reeds to the horizon, standing water sheeted with ice that should have gone a month ago, channels, mud banks, the smell of it rolling over the road in slow waves, sulphur and rot and cold weed, a smell like the whole earth's cellar. Ravenna sits in that, out where the marsh meets the sea, a city on islands and pilings, unreachable by any army that doesn't own the water, which is exactly why emperors moved there when the world started falling apart a century ago. The strongest wall in Italy is mud. You walk beside the ox team, goad in hand, breath steaming, and the marsh does something to sound that you've heard about but never felt. It flattens everything, eats it, so that the creak of the carts and the clop of hooves seem to travel about 10 feet and then drown. In the haze with the dim light, the reeds fade into whiteness in every direction, and the road behind you disappears, and there are hours in the middle of that first day when the whole visible world is 2 carts, 4 oxen, 4 men, and 100 paces of gravel, moving through a pale nothing under a dead sun. Like being inside an egg, Ursus says and laughs alone. The Dalmatian, who's been to Ravenna many times, who fought, people say, in the Emperor's army once on the other side of the sea, spits over the ditch and says the only thing he'll say all morning. I saw a sky like this once before, in Dalmatia, when Mount Scardus burned inland and the ash came over us for 3 days. He looks up at the haze with his pale eyes. This is like that. So a mountain is burning, you ask. Where? He shrugs with just his eyebrows. Not anywhere near, he says. 3 days that lasted. Count what this has lasted. And he walks on ahead to check the ford, leaving you to do the counting, and the counting does not comfort you. By evening you reach the halt at the edge of the deep marsh, a posting station left over from the Empire, half its rooms roofless now, one wing kept up by an innkeeper who charges you for floor space by the body and for hay by the armful, and looks like he'd charge for the air if he could figure out the measuring. You sleep badly among strangers, mule drivers, and a pig dealer, and 2 silent men with military boots, Everyone's wet wool steaming around a mean fire, and through the broken roof of the next room you can see the night sky. And here is the thing about the nights now, the thing people don't talk about as much as the sun, but which is somehow worse. The stars are going out too, not gone, dimmed. The great constellations you've known since childhood, that your grandmother taught you, the wagon, the hen and chicks, they're still there, but faded, smudged, like embers under ash, and the moon when it rises is the colour of watered wine. Whatever is over the world is over all of it, day and night, seamless. It's not weather. Weather has edges. You lie on your back on the packed dirt of a dying empire's post station, 16 years old, listening to strangers snore, watching the ash-dim stars through a broken Roman roof, and tomorrow you will see the city. Ravenna announces itself first by smell, then by sound, then by sight in that order, and the smell arrives an hour before anything else. Wood smoke. First, the smoke of thousands of hearths lying trapped under the haze like a lid on a pot, and then, threaded through it, salt and tar and fish and opened sewage and wet stone. The composite smell of human beings in bulk, which you have never smelled before because you have never been anywhere with more than 100 people in it. Then the sound, a low continuous grinding murmur under everything, which you at first take for the sea. It is not the sea. It is talking. It is 10,000 people talking at once, a mile away, forever. Then the walls come out of the haze. They rise straight off the flat land, brick, red-brown, streaked dark with damp, higher than anything you have ever seen that wasn't a hill, and they go on. That's what your eye can't manage. Standing beside the ox team on the causeway with your goad forgotten in your hand, the going on of them. A tower, a stretch of wall, a tower, a stretch of wall, dissolving into the murk in both directions, and above the walls, floating in the dimness, shapes you have no names for yet. The drums and cones of church towers, tiled domes, the long roof line of something enormous, and gulls. The first big wheeling crowds of birds you've seen in 2 weeks, screaming around the towers, because the city feeds its birds even in a broken spring. Ursus has stopped dead in the road. So have you. Faustinus, behind, runs his cart's team into yours and swears, and the Dalmatian looks back at the two of you, boys gaping at a wall, and permits himself the entire smile he's been saving all trip. Close your mouths, he says. The gate guards fine you for looking rural. He's joking. You genuinely cannot tell that he's joking until Ursus laughs. The gate is a tunnel through the wall's thickness, and the wall's thickness is longer than your house. In the cold shadow inside it, the sound of the cartwheels goes up around you like the inside of a drum, and a bored Gothic soldier with a spear leans off a bench, lifts the corner of the oiled cloth, sniffs the cheese, asks whose estate, hears Gundula's name, waves you on, and just like that, between one wheel turn and the next, you're inside a city for the first time in your life. You will remember the next hour in pieces for as long as you live, because that is how your mind takes it in pieces, because the whole doesn't fit. Streets paved with great flat stones, worn to a shine, wheel ruts an inch deep, worn into stone, worn by wheels. How many wheels does that take? How many 100 years? Buildings of brick 3 and 4 floors high, leaning their laundry at each other across the gaps. An arcade of shops where the smells change every 4 paces like rooms in a dream. Bread, leather, hot metal, frying oil, incense, urine, roses. How are there roses? A marble woman, twice life-size, standing on a plinth at a crossroads with her hand raised. Some empress or goddess, 600 years old, her nose gone, pigeons on her head, and nobody looking at her. Nobody at all. A miracle on a corner and the entire crowd walks past it, the way you'd walk past a fence post. And that, more than the walls, is when you understand what a city is. A city is a place with so many miracles they've stopped counting them. And the people. You have never seen strangers in bulk. Everyone you've ever met, you know of, or can place by family within one conversation. Here faces come at you in hundreds, each one complete, each one belonging to an entire life you will never know anything about. Water sellers, porters bent under wine jars, a Gothic lady on a mule with servants clearing her path, sailors speaking something that isn't Latin and isn't Gothic, a blind beggar singing psalms at the door of a church with his ruined eyes turned up to the ruined sun, two clerks in clean white arguing about grain prices in the doorway of an office, priests, soldiers and children, everywhere, running under the cart's wheels so that your heart stops 6 times in a mile. But here is what you notice, under the din and the wonder, because you are your mother's son, and she told you to watch the light. You notice that the city is doing what your village is doing, looking up. Not all the time, not openly, but every few paces, some face in the crowd tilts back, checks the sky, drops again. The water seller does it between customers. The Gothic lady does it. The clerks arguing about grain prices do it. And their argument, when you pass close, has numbers in it that mean nothing to you, and a tone in it that means everything. The tight, fast, quiet tone of men who have understood something before the crowd has. Grain prices. Remember that tone. You'll hear it again by summer everywhere, and by autumn it won't be quiet. The Lord's townhouse is in the good quarter near the palace, and you unload the wool and the cheese into its storerooms under the eye of a household steward so clean he looks boiled, and you hand over Gundilla's letter with both hands like it's a relic, and the steward reads it standing there, frowns once in the middle, and does the sky glance right on cue. You're given bread and hot bean pottage in the kitchen yard and told the carts return tomorrow, loaded with things the Lord once sent to the country, which turns out when the porters start bringing it out, to include iron tools, sacks of extra seed grain, and salt, a great deal of salt. The Lord's household, you realise, watching the salt go into your cart, is not planning for a strange season. It's planning for a bad year. The rich have already had the thought your village is still circling. They've had it in writing. You have the afternoon. Ursus wants to find the horse market and a drink, and Faustinus goes with him to prevent the second thing from swallowing the first. The Dalmatian looks at you, standing in the street doing your sky glance, and jerks his chin. "Come on, farm boy," he says. "You should see it while it's standing." "See what?" "Everything," he says. "This is the last of it, you know. The old world. They keep it here the way you keep an old man's things in a chest." He starts walking, stiff-shouldered, sure of the turns. The last emperor lived here, died here for that matter, deposed here at least, 60 years back, a boy your age. Nobody bothered to kill him. That's how finished it all was. Now the Goths keep it running, and the clerks keep it Roman, and the churches keep it holy, and it all balances. He looks up at the dead sun over the roofline, and his voice does the thing everyone's voice is doing this spring, the drop, the flattening. Balance things don't like years like this. He takes you first through the streets toward the water, and you see the harbours, or the edge of them, the canal called the Fossa, where sea-going ships come right in among the buildings, masts standing over the rooftops like a leafless forest, hulls from Constantinople and Alexandria and Carthage, grain ships, and the Dalmatian names them by their build the way you'd name cattle, and dock workers stream over them like ants, and you smell pitch and bilge water, and, off one broad-beamed monster, the dusty golden smell of wheat in bulk, African wheat that grew last year under a sun that still worked. The city eats from the sea, the Dalmatian says. Remember that too. When the land fails, cities with harbours eat longest. He says it lightly. You store it the way you'd store a knife. And then he takes you to the churches, and the churches are where the year 536 finally breaks something open in you. And to explain why, I need you to stand where Paulus is standing. You have lived your whole life in brown. Understand that. Mud, wood, thatch, undyed wool, winter skies, the interior of a smoke-blackened farmhouse. The most intense colour you have ever owned is the green of growing barley and the red of a fire. You have heard, in church, about heaven, about light eternal, about gold, and these have always been words, referring to nothing you'd ever seen, the way the sea is a word to a man of the plains. Now the Dalmatian walks you through a plain brick doorway, out of the brown dim street, into the church of the palace, and the ceiling above you is on fire. Gold, a vault of gold mosaic, 10,000, 100,000 small cubes of glass with gold leaf sealed inside them, each one set at its own slight angle, so that the whole surface doesn't shine. It moves, it swims, it breathes light down at you even in this dim year, even from candles and grey windows, gold that turns as you turn, and standing in the gold, figures, robed saints with great dark eyes, sheep in green meadows, Christ young and beardless in imperial purple, a heaven of peacocks and stars and vines, blue like no blue in nature, green like the first day of the world, and it hangs over you, silent, complete, and the brick outside gave no warning at all, none. The miracle is entirely inside, like an egg lined with lightning. Your legs actually stop working for a moment. That's not a figure of speech. You stand in the doorway of the church with your mouth open. Rural fines be damned, and your eyes go hot and blur, and you don't know why, and you're embarrassed, and you can't stop it. 16 years old, mud on your legging wraps, blood cracks on your hands, staring up at the only unbroken sky you've seen in 2 weeks. Because that's what it is. You understand it without a single word forming. Outside, the real sky is dying, or sick, or angry. In here, men have built one that cannot go out. The gold doesn't dim. The saints don't waver. Whoever set these little squares of light, and it took years, and some of the setters are surely dead, they were answering something. They were saying, the light you can trust is not the one outside. The Dalmatian stands beside you, hands clasped behind his back, looking up with an old soldier's face that gives nothing away. And after a while he says quietly, every time, 40 years I've been coming in here, and every time, across the city this same spring, on an island of firm ground near the harbour, there is a construction site, mountains of brick, lime pits, scaffolding, an 8-sided ring of walls slowly rising, workmen swarming it in the dim light. You'll pass it on the way back to the carts, and the Dalmatian will tell you a banker named Julianus is paying for it. 26,000 gold solidi, a sum so far beyond your arithmetic it might as well be the number of the reeds in the marsh, and that it's to be called San Vitale, and that they say the inside will outshine everything in Italy. They are building it right through the darkness. They will keep building it right through everything that's coming, the famine, the war, all of it. 11 more years, and the year it's finished, an artist will set into its wall a portrait in mosaic of the Emperor Justinian, who never once set foot in this city, and that portrait will still be looking down from that wall, perfect, unfaded, when your bones and this story are 1,500 years old. You don't know any of that. You just walk past a half-built brick octagon in the twilight of the worst year in history, and you hear trowels ringing and you think, they're not stopping, and something in your chest, which has been clenched since the 11th dim morning, loosens by exactly 1 notch. The candle for St. Apollinaris cost you more than your mother budgeted, because wax, the chandler tells you with a shrug, has gone up. Everything has gone up. And this is the first time in your life a stranger has said those words to you. Everything has gone up, and you have no way of knowing you've just heard the anthem of the next 2 years sung for the first time. You buy the candle anyway, a real one, honey-smelling, smooth and cool and faintly greasy in your hand, and you carry it to the church and light it and kneel on marble, actual marble, cold as ice through your knees, and you pray the way you were taught, and then, because no one can hear inside a head, you add your own part, which is not elegant. Bring it back. Please, we'll do anything, bring the sun back. Every candle in that church, and there are hundreds, and the racks have been extended twice since March. This sacristan will tell anyone who asks. Every one of those candles is carrying some version of that same sentence upward. The church has never taken in so much wax. Fear, it turns out, burns bright and pays in advance. The salt costs less than you feared, and you buy what the 3 soliloquy can carry minus the candle, and the weight of the salt bag on your shoulder walking back through the darkening streets is the best weight you've ever carried, because salt is the one thing that laughs at bad summers. Salt keeps the pig. Salt keeps the cheese. Salt is time in a bag, and your mother knew that before the clerks did. That evening, the lust in the city, you and Ursus sit on the tail of the cart in the courtyard of the Lord's house, sharing the wine Faustinus decided you'd earned, watered, sour, wonderful, and over the roof line the domes and towers go from grey to darker grey. No sunset colours. There are no sunset colours this year, and the gulls settle, and the 10,000-voice murmur of the city drops slowly toward night, and Ursus, who has spent the day being loud about horses, goes quiet for once and says, "You saw the gold ceiling?" "I saw it." "My father shoes horses," Ursus says. "His father shoed horses. I'll shoe horses." And some man spent his whole life gluing little bits of glass to a roof. He turns his cup. I keep thinking about that. His whole life, that ceiling. And it'll be there when everything I ever make is rust. He drinks. I can't decide if it makes me feel small or safe. Both, you say, and you're right. And neither of you says anything else. And that's the closest thing to philosophy that happens on the whole journey. 2 farm boys with sour wine under a dead sky. And honestly, it's better philosophy than some of what the learned men of the age are producing on the same subject. Because at least it's true. The road home takes 2 days and gives you the marsh in rain, a fine, cold, endless rain that comes down through the haze like the sky sweating, and the causeway gravel goes greasy, and the oxen labour, and the salt rides under 3 layers of oiled cloth like a sleeping king, and you arrive in your own yard after dark on the 2nd day, soaked to the bone, feet bleeding in your boots, and your mother takes one look at the salt and does something you've never seen her do about anything. She puts both hands over her mouth, and then the year truly begins. Here is how a famine arrives. It's important that you understand this, lying there warm in your bed, because everyone imagines famine as an event, a thing that strikes, like a storm. It isn't. Famine is a slow arithmetic that everyone does silently, in private, for months, while saying ordinary things out loud. April. The seed goes into cold ground, weeks late. Your whole family bent in the drizzle, dropping spelt into furrows that steam faintly with cold, and everyone straightens up at the end of each row with the same unspoken word passing between their eyes. Maybe. May. The shoots come up. They actually come up thin and pale, and for a week the village is almost giddy. People stop each other on the paths to say it's coming along, it's coming along. Then the frost on the last night of May in blossom time, and in the morning the fruit trees stand with their flowers cooked brown on the branch. Cherries, apples, all of it. One night, gone, and the vines hit too, and old Severus stands in his little orchard snapping dead blossom off a plum tree with his thumb over and over, not saying anything, and that's the morning the giddiness dies and the arithmetic starts. June, cold. July, cold, and the light still wrong, still filtered through that high, pale filth. Week after week, so that the wheat that should be waist-high and hardening stands knee-high and green in July, and the beans do a little better. Gundilla was right about the beans, and the whole village begins, quietly, without anyone announcing it, to eat differently. Less bread at noon. Porridge stretched with more water. Your mother starts drying things she never bothered drying before. Nettles, goosefoot, marsh greens, hanging in bunches from the rafters till the ceiling of the house looks like a hay meadow upside down, and nobody comments, because commenting would mean admitting what it's for. Your body learns the year in its own language. You're 16 and doing double ditch work on shortened bread, and by midsummer you know the exact grammar of exhaustion. The tremble that starts in the forearms by mid-afternoon, the way your hands cramp into hooks around the spade haft so that at night you flex them open finger by finger, hearing the knuckles crack, the mud-softened skin peeling at the thumb creases, the salt sting of your own sweat in the cracks, and the special heaviness of legs that have stood in cold ditch water for 6 hours. A heaviness that goes up past the knees into the hips, so that climbing the ladder to the loft at night takes actual planning. You fall asleep the way a dropped tool falls. Your dreams all year are of one thing. Everyone's are, though it takes until autumn before people admit it to each other, and then it becomes a grim joke that runs around the village all winter. What did you eat last night in your sleep? Fresh bread, someone says. White, someone says. White wheat bread with honey, and everyone laughs, and the laugh has an edge on it like a sickle. In August, at what should have been harvest, Gundula walks the Lord's 40 Ugera with 2 of the older tenants, and you watch from the ditch you're clearing, and you can read the whole verdict from 300 paces just in how the men stand, and how long they stand, and how Gundula finally takes his cap off and rubs his grey head with his wrist. A gesture of pure helplessness from a man who has none, and then puts the cap back on and turns it into orders. The verdict, when it's spoken that evening, they'll wait as long as they dare, into September, October if the rain allows, to let the grain fill what little it will, and when it's finally cut, in a cold drizzle in early October by men working with numb hands, the whole great field, 40 Ugera, the best land on the estate, yields not much better than 1/3 of an ordinary year, and the grains themselves, when you rub an ear out in your palm, are small, wrinkled grey-green things, seed corn's poor cousins, and threshing them is heartbreak by the basketful. 1/3. Hold that number. Now do what every family on that estate is doing that same evening around their fires, out loud or not. 1/3 of the grain minus the rent. Because the rent does not become 1/3 of itself. minus the seed for next spring, which must be held back or next year is death, even if the sun returns minus the tithe. What remains is winter. What remains is not enough for winter. Every man, woman and child in that village finishes that arithmetic within the same week, and the village changes, not visibly, not loudly, but the way a rope changes when it takes up load. Doors that were never locked are locked. Dogs are suddenly valued. The granary gets a new hasp and Gundilla puts a man on it at night, and nobody asks why, and everybody knows why, and the man he puts on it is Ursus, because Ursus is enormous and cheerful, and everyone likes him, and even that is a calculation. A guard everyone likes is a guard nobody has to hate yet. And it's in October, with a pitiful harvest in and the arithmetic done, that word comes down the road from Ravenna, passed from cart to cart, mouth to mouth, growing as it comes, of the great procession. The Archbishop, they say, the whole city, they say, a supplication to God for the return of the light at the Basilica of the Port, and the countryside is called too, all souls come and be counted before heaven. Gundilla releases the estate for 3 days. It's the cheapest generosity in the world, he says flatly. There's nothing left to work anyway, and perhaps the only thing left to try over the year 536 is prayer at volume. So in the 3rd week of October you walk to Ravenna again, this time not with wool but with everyone, your whole family except your grandmother, who says the walking would kill her and the crowd would finish the job, your father coughing his way north with his good cloak on, your mother with the baby bound to her chest, Eustace wide-eyed, the whole road filling as you go, streams of country people joining from every lane and dyke path, until the causeway through the marsh is a single slow grey river of humanity moving under the haze, thousands more people than you knew the world held, and the sound of them is not talk, that's what strikes you. So many people and so little talk. Just the shuffle and slap of feet, coughing, a baby here and there, EB, psalms starting up in one stretch and dying out and starting somewhere else. The whole column moving through the reeds like something out of scripture, and above you the sun crosses the sky like a blind eye. Day 30, something past 200 of the Vale. Nobody counts any more, and watches its people come. The procession itself you will remember in the body, not the mind, the way you remember cold water. It begins at the cathedral in the heart of the city and goes out the southeastern gate toward the port suburb of Klasa, 3 miles, and by the time your section of the crowd passes under the gate, you have been standing packed among strangers for 2 hours, close enough to smell each one. Wet wool and tallow and sickness and infant and old woman, close enough to feel the heat coming off the man in front of you through both your cloaks, and the crowd moves the way the marsh water moves. In slow surges you can't resist, so that you learn immediately to keep Eustace's hand crushed in yours and your other fist knotted in your mother's cloak, and your feet sometimes move because the crowd moves them, touching ground only every second step, and there is a moment near the gate when the pressure builds from behind, and the crowd compresses, and for 10 heartbeats you cannot fully inflate your chest. 10 heartbeats of pure animal panic swallowed in silence because everyone around you is swallowing the same panic, and then the gate is passed and the pressure blooms outward and air comes back and nobody says anything about it. Ever. That's the crowd's rule. What happens in the crush stays in the body. Ahead, far ahead, unseen. The Archbishop of Ravenna walks barefoot. That word runs back down the column faster than any herald. Barefoot, barefoot, and it lands on the crowd with enormous weight. Because everyone here knows what a great man's feet are for. They're for stirrups and marble floors, and the image of them bare on cold October stone is worth more than any sermon. Behind him, they say, the relics, silver reliquaries under embroidered canopies, and the clergy of every church in the city in their vestments, gold thread under the grey sky, the only sunrise available, carried by hand at shoulder height. You see none of it. You see the backs of heads, 3,000 of them. But the singing reaches you, moving down the column like weather, the Kyrie in waves, one section of the crowd taking it up as the one ahead lets it fall, so that the chant rolls over you every few minutes from front to back like the tide over a flat shore, and you sing when it reaches you. Everyone does. Your father in his cracked voice, your mother with the baby's head cupped under her chin, 10,000 voices under a hazed sun asking heaven. In Greek words most of them don't know they're singing, Lord, have mercy, and the marsh flattening the sound on either side, eating it, so that even 10,000 voices sound small out there. And maybe that's the real lesson of the day, the one nobody puts in a chronicle. How small it all sounds from outside. How small we are willing to sound when we're afraid enough, all together, out loud, at Classe, at the Basilica of St. Apollinaris near the port. The crowd fills the square and the streets beyond it and the muddy fields beyond those, and the Mass is said, and you are 400 paces from the doors and hear none of it, and it doesn't matter. Hearing it was never the point, and when at some signal the whole immense crowd kneels, it goes down in a wave, thousands of knees hitting mud and stone in a long, rolling rumble like a building deciding not to fall, and you kneel in cold mud between your father and your brother with your candle stub lit and shielded in both hands, one flame among thousands, the whole grey square trembling with little lights, and you look up, everyone looks up. That's what the day is for, and the sun is there behind its veil, pale, blind, blue-tinged, unchanged, and you hold your little fire up toward it anyway. It does not come back that day. You need to know that, because part of you is waiting for the story where the clouds part over the kneeling crowd. That story doesn't happen. The procession walks home in the same grey light it walked out in, and the veil stays over the sun through November and December and beyond, and the learned men keep writing their nervous letters, and the arithmetic keeps being what it is. But something does change that day, and it changes in you, kneeling in the mud at class, and you'll spend years figuring out what it was. So let me say it now while you're young and it's fresh. You learn that despair is lighter when it's shared. That's all. That's the whole miracle on offer in the year 536. 10,000 people frightened together are mysteriously less frightened than one person frightened alone, and the sun gains nothing by it, and the wheat gains nothing by it, and it is still, somehow, everything. Your father walks the 12 miles home with more life in him than he's had since spring, coughing and all, telling Eustace stories about the city, and your mother hums, and you carry the baby the last 3 miles asleep against your shoulder, her breath a small warm patch through your tunic, the warmest thing in Italy, and you think, we're going to try to live through this, all of us at once. That's decided now. Winter says otherwise. Winter says it early and keeps saying it. The snow comes in November and it comes to stay. Real snow, deep, in a country where snow is usually a visitor of days. The marsh freezes out to the horizon. The wind comes off it with an edge like a draw knife, and the house closes around your family like a fist. And now the year plays its long, patient endgame, and I won't pretend to you that it's anything but what it is. You eat twice a day, then once and a half, then once. with something warm and nearly empty in the evening to trick your stomach towards sleep. Bread becomes a compound word. Bread and bread stretched with bean flour, then with vetch, then with things your mother doesn't name, dried greens ground fine, and by February in the worst houses, though not yet in yours, with the sweepings of the threshing floor and the inner bark of elms, stripped and dried and pounded. Famine bread, which is bitter and grey-green and sits in the belly like river clay, and keeps people alive while quietly ruining them. The pig is killed early, in November instead of January, because there's nothing to feed it, and the salt from Ravenna does its royal work, and your mother portions that pig across the winter with a precision that would humble the clerks of the palace, an inventory carried entirely in her head, revised nightly. And one evening you watch her stand at the rafters where the flitches hang, touching each piece in order, lips moving, and you realize she is doing division, the real kind, the kind where the divisor is her children. Hunger, real hunger, sustained over months, is not a pain. You'd trade it for a pain. It's an occupation. It moves into your skull and takes over rooms. You think about food the way a man in debt thinks about money, constantly, involuntarily, with a wheel rut kind of thinking that goes round and round the same track, and meanwhile the body starts making its quiet withdrawals. The cold gets into you faster and leaves slower, small cuts heal slow, gums go tender, your legs after the ladder feel like a day's ditching when all you did was feed the oxen, and your mind goes strange in small ways, forgetful, weepy over nothing, and then oddly flat over things that should matter. Eustace stops growing that winter. You don't notice it happening. You notice it in spring, when his wrists come out of last year's sleeves exactly as far as they did the autumn before, and you'll notice it your whole life after, because he stays a small man, your brother, a small wiry man, and every time you see his wrists you'll see that winter. The pig-killing day itself deserves its minute, because in a hungry November it is the strangest festival there is. Grief and plenty in the same yard on the same morning. It's done cold and early, all the neighbours' hands lent as always, the great cauldron of scalding water steaming into the grey air like a portal, and the work is what the work has always been. Heavy, precise, bloody, ancient. The scraping of the scalded hide with cupped iron until it comes clean and pale, the rasp of it travelling up your arms, your hands red and boiled, feeling in the steam and then instantly freezing when you step back, the smell of blood and scald and singed bristle hanging low in the windless cold, the careful ceremony of division, nothing lost, nothing, the blood itself caught and stirred against clotting, your mother's arm going like a mill for the black puddings, the fat rendered, the small meats eaten that same night in the one open-handed meal of the whole winter, everyone greasy-fingered and briefly guiltily glad. But the difference this year sits at the edge of the yard where the children stand watching, and it's in the arithmetic behind every adult eye. This pig is 2 months younger and 80 pounds lighter than the pig of any other November, and it is the last large eating animal the family owns, and when it is hung in its pieces from the rafters, salted with the salt you carried out of Ravenna on your own shoulder, the whole winter is suddenly visible at a glance, right there, countable, hanging in the smoke, and there will be no more added to it, whatever happens, until a son nobody fully trusts any more consents to grow another year of barley. Your father stands looking up at the hanging meat a long moment that evening, and then does something he almost never does, puts his hand flat on your shoulder and says nothing at all. And the hand says it. You carried the salt. Some of this winter hangs there because of you. 16 years old, and you have entered the household's ledger on the side of the provisions. There are worse ways to become a man. In January, old Severus dies. In his own bed, his daughter beside him, which counts as a good death in the year of our Lord 536, going on 537. And they say the old man's last words were about the light. They always say that afterward. But Ursus, who helped dig the grave, tells you the true detail, the one that stays. The ground was frozen so hard 2 feet down that they had to burn straw and dung on the gravesite for a night and a day before the spades could get in. To bury one old man, they had to thaw Italy with fire. In February, a family on the far side of the estate, the Vetti, 6 of them, are caught by Gundilla's nightman coming out of the granary with a sack. And here is where you learn what kind of man the steward actually is. Because the law of the estate, the old law, the law with teeth, is available to him, and every tenant holds their breath for a week, and what Gundilla does instead is this. He takes back the sack, docks the family's ration to the edge of the possible, but not over it, sets the father to the worst of the ditch work through the cold, and says, to the men gathered to watch him decide, one sentence that goes around the district for the rest of the winter. If I hang a man for hunger this year, I will run out of rope before the year runs out of hunger. Then he sends the Vetti 2 of his own hens, both those things, in the same week. You're 16 and you file it away permanently. This is what authority looks like when it's real. It counts what it has. It does not perform anger, and it feeds what it just punished, because it is playing a longer game called Everyone Alive in Spring. Not everyone is alive in spring. 3 of the old ones go before March, and 1 baby, not your families, God's mercy counted in the smallest coins, and in the hungriest houses at the season's bottom. People are eating things that don't get spoken of at other tables, and twice that winter, strangers come up the road from the south, grey-faced walking bundles of rag. People from districts where it's worse, and the village feeds them at the edge of itself, a bowl at a doorway, and watches them until they walk on, and is ashamed of the watching, and does it anyway. Charity with its eyes open. Everything this year has its eyes open. And through all of it, 12 miles north, behind the walls, the city eats its African wheat, thinner than usual, dearer than ever. The clerk's quiet spring voices now a public roar in the grain market, and the banker's octagon rises another few courses of brick. Trowels ringing in the frost, and in the palace, though no one in your village knows it yet, letters are going back and forth across the sea that are worse news than any frost. Because in this same black year, while the sun hides, the emperor in Constantinople has decided the time has come to take Italy back from the Goths, and his general Belisarius has already swallowed Sicily and is coming north, and the year without a sun is about to be followed by 20 years of war. So that between the sky and the sword and the great plague waiting 5 years down the road, this land you're standing on has already begun the long fall out of the old world and into the dark one, and none of you know it, and it wouldn't help you to know it, and the beans still have to go in come April. That's the mercy of it, if you want the mercy. Nobody has to survive the 6th century tonight. Tonight there is only this winter, this house, this fire. 1 year at a time is how everyone has ever done it. March of the new year, 537, comes in cold and grey, and the veil is still on the sun. Thinner now, some mornings almost thin enough to hope through. And hope has become a thing your village handles carefully. with 2 hands like a cracked bowl. The seed grain has made it through the winter, guarded harder than the church plate, and there is a morning in the first week of April when you stand at the edge of the Lord's field at what passes for dawn, with the seed bag heavy on your hip, its woven strap cutting into your shoulder, your hand buried to the wrist in cool spelt, and you understand that what you are about to do is the single largest act of faith available to a human being. Not the procession, not the candles. This, throwing the last of the food onto the ground on purpose, in a year that has already lied to you once. You sow it anyway. Everyone sows it anyway. That's the species you belong to. 50 generations of your family are in your wrist as it swings. Broadcast steps swing, the seed hissing out over the cold furrows in fans, and behind you the harrow, and above you the pale smudge where the sun is, and you notice, because by now you are a connoisseur of that smudge, a scholar of it, that your shadow this morning has edges, faint, but edges. You don't say anything. You've learned not to say anything. But you sow the rest of the field a little faster, and now let the year turn the way years actually turn, which is all at once slowly and behind your back. The light comes back the way strength comes back after a fever, so gradually that there is no day you can point to, no morning of trumpets. Through the spring the veil thins, the blue leaches out of the sun and the yellow seeps back in. Shadows regain their weight week by week, and one evening in early summer there is a sunset, an actual sunset, red and gold and violently ordinary, the first in 15 months, and the whole village comes out of doors and stands in the lanes to watch it as if a king were passing, and your grandmother weeps at it furiously, denying that she's doing so the entire time, and the swallows come back to the ditches that summer, late and few, but back, and the storks stand on the granary again like a blessing that took the long road. The harvest of 537 is not good. I won't lie into your drowsy ear. The ground is tired, and the spring was cold, and the yield is poor. But poor is a different country from none. Poor is survivable arithmetic, and the village does that arithmetic in the autumn light, real light, thick and golden and slanting the way light is supposed to slant, and finds that it comes out the other side lean but alive, and that first proper loaf from the new grain, when your mother sets it on the table, still hot, its crust crackling faintly as it cools, that loaf gets looked at for a while before anyone touches it. Then your father, who has survived his cough and his year, cuts it, and the smell that comes up from the opened crumb, wheat and warmth, the smell of the sun doing its work at last through the body of the world, that smell is the actual end of the year, 536, whatever the calendars say, and there is a silence around that table. 4 breaths long. That is the deepest prayer said in Italy that day. The war comes as the letters promised, but it comes past you, not through you. The great armies fighting for Rome far to the south that year, and Ravenna holds its breath behind its marshes, and Gundula drills the estate's men with staves in the autumn evenings just in case, stiff hip and all, and you turn out for it with the rest, and the world goes on being dangerous because it's the 6th century, and that is the whole climate of the age. But that's another year's story. Another year's stories are tomorrow's problem. Always, forever. That's the rule. Here is where I want to leave you, though. Not with the war, with a ladder. It's a Sunday in October of 537, and the Dalmatian, who has taken a liking to you in his flint-faced way since the carts, gets you up the bell tower of the basilica at Classe, because he knows the sacristan, because the Dalmatian knows a man everywhere, and the tower stairs are a tight brick spiral, and your legs, which have hauled a famine year on their backs, take it slowly. Hand on the cold curved wall, dust and pigeon smell and bars of real yellow light falling through the slit windows, and then the last ladder, rungs worn glassy, and then the bell platform, and the wind, and the world. You've never been higher than a hayrick. Now Italy lies down flat in front of you and shows you everything. The sea to the east, grey-silver, seamed with light, with sails on it, actual toy small ships heading for the port below. The marshes running north, endless, green gold in the low sun, threaded with channels that catch the light like poured metal. Ravenna itself, its domes and towers standing up out of the flat like a fleet at anchor, smoke rising from 1,000 fires straight into a clean sky. And south and west, the checkered land, field and ditch and hedge and lane, and somewhere in that quilt, too far to pick out, but you look anyway. You look a long time. The roof under which everyone you love is spending this Sunday afternoon, alive. The bells hang around you, huge, green-brown, silent, and the Dalmatian leans on the parapet with the wind moving his grey hair and says, "Well, farm boy, there it is, the year that tried to kill us laid out flat." He nods at the whole horizon, the sea, the city, the marsh, the fields. Take a good look. Most men only ever see their year from inside it. And you take the good look, and what you see from up here is the thing you could never see from inside the furrow, that it's all still there. The light came back, the land came back, the people, most of them came back, not because heaven relented, maybe, and not because the candles worked, and not because you deserved it. The dust settled out of the sky because dust settles, that's all. That may be all it ever was. But underneath that indifferent sky, all year, people fed each other, and guarded each other's seed, and thawed the ground with fire to bury their dead decently, and walked 3 miles barefoot to sing badly in the mud together, and kept laying brick on a church. Nobody would see finished for a decade. The sky does not owe you anything. That was the first rule, learned in a frozen March. Here is the second rule, learned on a bell tower in October, and it took the whole worst year in history to teach it. People owe each other everything. And the strange thing, the thing no chronicle bothers to write down, is how often, when it truly matters, they pay. You climb down before the light goes. There are 12 miles to walk, and Sunday or not, the animals need you at the other end of them. The seasons find their old rhythm again, roughly, imperfectly, the way a limping man finds his stride. Another winter, an ordinary one, cold in the ordinary quantities. Another spring, and this one green on time. The pasture beyond the ditch coming up in that first thin, bright green in early March, right on schedule, and you stand in the yard one morning looking at it, and you realise you're checking it the way you once checked the sun, and you realise you'll be doing that for the rest of your life. Everyone who lived through the veil does it. You can tell the survivors of 536 decades later, old men and women at their doors, by their upward flick of the eyes at odd moments, that small, silent question put to the sky, "Are you still working?" Yes, still working. All right then, you grow up. That happens too in the ordinary miraculous way. Your hands, already old at 16, get broader and surer. Your father lives 11 more years, longer than his cough had any right to allow, long enough to lay eyes on your first child, and your brother Eustace stays small, and turns out to have the quickest mind on the estate, so that Gundula, gone grey as ash but still upright, takes him into the accounts, and your mother rules the whole widening family from beside her fire with an authority no king in Ravenna ever matched, and the salt bag hangs empty on its peg for years because nobody can quite bring themselves to use it for anything else. The wars grind on somewhere, near and far by turns. The great plague comes in its time and takes its terrible tithe and passes. The kingdom of the Goths falls at last, and the emperor's men rule from Ravenna instead. And for the people in the furrows it means new tax collectors with older Latin, and the world that the learned men called Roman keeps quietly becoming the other thing, the medieval thing, the thing with no name yet, and historians 15 centuries away will draw their line through exactly these years, through your years, and say, here. This is where the ancient world ends. The year the sun failed, the wars that followed, the plague that followed the wars. If the Dark Ages began anywhere, they began over that boy's head, in that yard, in that cold March light. You never learn what did it. You die never knowing. An old man on the same estate, and your grandchildren die never knowing, and 40 generations die never knowing, until people in another age entirely learn to read ice. In Greenland and Antarctica, snow that fell in your lifetime is still there, pressed to ice, a mile down, and in the layer for the year 536 there is sulphur, a great worldwide spike of it, volcanic breath frozen into the planet's memory, and in the tree rings of Irish oaks and alpine pines, the summers of 536 to 545 are pinched and pale, the narrowest rings in 2,000 years, and so at last the account balances. A volcano, far in the north of the world, tore itself open at the start of your 16th year, and the sky wore its ashes for 18 months, and you, Paulus, tenant's son, felt it in your split thumb on a frozen chain hook on a March morning 12 miles south of Ravenna, before dawn, before breakfast, before anyone in the world knew anything at all. The earth wrote it down twice, is the point, once in ice, once in you. And here, before we drift back down into the quiet parts of the year, you should know what Paulus could not know, which is how big it all was, because from inside the furrow, the veil over the sun was a local catastrophe. Your valley's affliction, at most Italy's, and half the terror was the loneliness of it, the feeling of being singled out. The truth was the opposite of lonely, and the truth travelled the way truth travelled in the 6th century, which is to say on foot weeks late attached to a peddler. He comes through in the veiled August, the peddler, a small quick Syrian with a mule and a pack of needles, ribbons, medicines of doubtful honesty, and news, which is his real merchandise, news being the one good that weighs nothing and sells everywhere. He does the circuit of the estates every year or two, and the whole village finds reasons to drift toward the yard where he's spread his cloth, and what he says that evening casually, professionally, feeding it out piece by piece between sales, rearranges the shape of the sky over everyone listening. It is like this everywhere, he says. Everywhere. He has it from shipmen at Ravenna, who have it from every port between here and the edge of maps. In Constantinople the sun has been dim these many months, and the emperor's own officials have watched it, and the fruit there withered on the branch. In Syria, his own country, the vines failed. There is word off the grain ships that even in Egypt, where the harvest has not failed since Pharaoh dreamed of thin cattle, the river's flood came strange, and from the cold islands past Gaul, from Britain and Hibernia, sailors carry stories of a failure of bread that has no bottom to it, years of it, kingdoms shaking. The whole world, the peddler says, holding up a ribbon the colour of a healthy sun and letting it catch what light there is. The whole world is under this same lid. One sky. One lid. He says it like a man selling ribbon, because he is a man selling ribbon, and it lands on the village like scripture. You stand at the edge of the yard listening 16, and you feel the strangest thing move through you, and you're honest enough, even that young, to be a little ashamed of it, because the thing is relief, not gladness, God forbid, not gladness at Egyptian withering. Relief that it isn't a judgment aimed here. A punishment addressed to your valley alone would mean your valley's sins had earned it, and every soul in the village has spent 5 months privately auditing those sins by firelight. But the whole world at once, that's not naming. That's something in the order of things, gone wrong at a level far above the reach of any village's wickedness. Your grandmother, when this reasoning's put to her that night, is unimpressed. The whole world has sins enough, she says, but even she sleeps better, you notice. Company again. Even at the scale of the world, the rule holds. Despair is lighter when it's shared. Modern people, lying comfortable in the dark 15 centuries later, know how right the peddler was, and better than he did. The tree rings of Scandinavia pinch in 536 like a held breath. The oaks of Ireland record it. The annals of Ulster and of Wales mark these exact years with the bleak little phrase, a failure of bread. In China, chronicles of the same months record summer frosts and snow, and yellow dust raining down like ash, and famine after. A Roman official in Constantinople writes of the sun giving no more than a feeble shadow through that whole year, of fruits killed unseasonably. It was, as far as the sciences of ice and wood can now measure, the coldest year of the last 2,000 across the whole northern half of the earth, the opening blow of a cold decade, the worst climate shock in the history of civilization, and every literate corner of the planet looked up at the same ruined light that a boy in the Po marshes was squinting at over an ox yoke, and wrote down its own version of the same sentence. The sun is wrong. We don't know why. We're afraid. One sky. One lid. The peddler moves on north the next morning with his mule and his needles, a small man stitching the world's parishes together with rumour, and you go back to the ditches carrying the new size of the thing, and it changes how the autumn feels. Not easier. Bigger. There's a difference, and it matters, though you'd be hard put to say why. Perhaps only this. It is one thing to be a boy whose valley is cursed, and another to be a boy standing in the front row of the largest event in the history of the sky. The work is identical. The mud is identical. The story you're inside has changed size, and human beings, for reasons that go all the way down, can bear almost anything better when the story is large. And there's one more scene from that grey autumn that ought to be kept, because it's the kind history always drops. The mill. The estate's mill sits on the drainage channel a mile north, an undershot wheel in a brick house green to the waterline, and in an ordinary October it is the happiest industrial site in the district. Queues of sacks, flour, dust hanging gold in the sun, the miller shouting jokes over the wheel's rumble and taking his 16th part and being accused in the friendly eternal way of taking a 15th. This October the mill runs quarter days. There is so little to grind. And when your family's turn comes, you go with your father and the sacks, such sacks, and the mill house is cold, and the great wheel turns in water that has ice at its margins already, groaning and slapping, shedding drops that hang and flash even in the weak light. And inside the stones do their work with the sound of stones, that deep, circular, sliding roar you feel in your sternum, and the grain, your poor wrinkled grey-green grain, goes down the hopper's throat in a thin, reluctant stream, ticking and rattling, and comes out below transformed, and here is the moment. The miller, old Crescens, runs the new flour through his fingers, rubbing a pinch, sniffing it, tasting a fleck of it off his thumb, and the way he's done at this shoot for 40 years, and everyone in the cold mill house watches his face like defendants watching a judge, and he works it a moment on his tongue and says, judiciously, giving each word its full weight, "It will make bread." 3 words, not good bread, not plenty. It will make bread, and your father's shoulders come down 1/2 an inch, and Crescens takes his 16th to the grain exact, honest as scale weights in a hungry year when honesty costs. And that, too, is a thing you file away about people, alongside Gundilla and his hens. Scarcity strips everyone down to what they actually are, and what a surprising number of them actually are, when the paint is off, is decent. The flour rides home on your shoulder, a half sack where the year owed you 3 full ones, but warm, faintly warm from the stone's friction, warm like a living thing against your neck, and the smell of it comes up around you as you walk, raw flour, sweetish, dusty, the primal smell of next month's survival, and your feet find the ruts of the lane without your eyes. Dusk coming down grey on the grey fields, one lit doorway ahead of you growing slowly larger, and if you want a single picture to hold the whole worst year in the history of the world, historians can keep their comets and their kings. It's this. A boy carrying a warm half sack of poor flour toward a lit doorway in the dark at the bottom of the 6th century, absolutely determined to get it there. But we're not done, you and I, not yet. The night is long and you're comfortable, and this is a sleep story after all. So before we let Paulus go, let's do what memory does. Let's drift back down into the middle of that year one more time, slowly now, with nothing to fear, because we already know how it ends. We know the loaf gets cut and the sunset comes back, and that knowledge changes everything about how the dark parts feel. Pain remembered in safety is almost a kind of warmth. Ask any old soldier, ask any old farmer, ask Paulus years from now, an old man himself sitting by his fire, going back over that year the way you're about to, scene by scene, in the dark, half asleep. Go back to midsummer of the veiled year, to a July night, to the granary. It's your turn on the watch. Gundula set the rotation weeks ago. 2 men a night, and tonight it's you and Ursus, and the watch itself is nothing. It's sitting. It's the easiest work you've done in a month, and that's exactly the problem. Because a body that has hauled ditch mud all day, and then stops moving in the cold, discovers every ache it owns, one at a time, like a man counting coins. You sit on an upturned barrow with your cloak wrapped double, and your spine against the granary door, and the timber is solid at your back, and the cold comes up through the barrow's boards into your thighs, patient as water, and Ursus sits beside you whittling something by feel, because there's no light to whittle by, just the small red eye of the firepot between your feet, and the sound of his knife is the loudest thing in the world. Snick, pause, snick, a curl of wood touching the ground with no sound at all. A July night should be short and warm and loud. There should be crickets in walls of sound on every side, frogs going in the ditches, nightjars churring in the pasture oaks, the air thick and green smelling and busy. This July night is long and cold and nearly silent, a few crickets only, scattered, slow like the last men awake at a wake, and your breath shows faintly even in the dark, and somewhere out in the marsh. Once something booms, a bittern maybe, one deep lonely note like a jug being blown, and then nothing again for an hour. The granary at your back holds what's left of last year's grain, and the seed for next year, and it is, you understand with your shoulder blades against its door, the most important building in your world. Not the chapel, not the Lord's house, this one. Everything else can burn and be rebuilt by living people. If this burns, there are no living people. You've never thought about a building this way before. The year is teaching you to see the world as a body sees it, sorted by what keeps you alive, and buildings have ranks now, and food has a glow to it in your mind, and you notice you can hear the grain, or you imagine you can. The enormous, soft, settled presence of it through the wood, tons of patient sleep, the whole village's winter dreaming behind a plank and a hasp and two tired boys. Ask you something, Ursus says out of a long silence. Snick. You were there in the city, the gold ceiling. Pause. You think God's really like that? All golden peacocks. You consider it, 16 years old, watch cold, hungry in the low ongoing way that had become the floor of everything. I think, you say, slowly, that's the best guess anyone's made so far. Ursus thinks about that, nods in the dark, whittles. Better than this year's guess, he says, tipping his chin at the starless haze. And neither of you laughs exactly, but something in the silence eases, and he hands you the thing he's been whittling, and it's a little bird, crude, blunt-winged, a swallow more or less. And he says, for your brother, tell him they'll be back, and that little wooden swallow will sit in a niche by your family's hearth for 60 years, and outlive both of you, and be lost by someone's grandchild in a move, and lie in Italian soil to this day, 3 inches down, waiting for an archaeologist who will never find it, and label it, if they did, votive object, bird form, 6th century, purpose unknown. Purpose known, actually. The purpose was hope, transmitted hand to hand in the dark. Most 6th century objects had that purpose. It doesn't survive burial. Deep in the middle of that night, the dogs start up at the far end of the village, and then the nearer dogs answer, and you and Ursus are both on your feet before you've decided anything, staves in hand, hearts going, staring into a darkness like the inside of a sack, and you stand like that back to back with the granary for a long 5 minutes, listening past your own pulse. Footsteps? No. Wind. A door somewhere. The dogs argue themselves quiet again, one suspicious woof at a time, and you sit back down with your heart still loping, and Ursus exhales a laugh, and this exact rhythm, boredom, jolt, listening, nothing, ease. This is the true texture of guarding things in every century, and by the 3rd alarm of the night you take even the fear a little drowsily, and by the grey unravelling of dawn when old Faustinus comes to relieve you, you have learned to sleep sitting up in half-hour pieces with the stave across your knees, a skill you did not have at sunset, another small skill for the year's collection, and you walk home through the cold dew with your joints clicking, past the pasture where the oxen lie like boulders breathing steam, and you sleep 2 hours and get up and go to the ditches, because that's the day. That's every day. And your body does it, because bodies can. That's the secret nobody tells you in advance. Bodies can do so much more than anyone would choose to find out. Now go further into the cold. Go to the deep of the hunger winter, January the frozen marsh. It's the Dalmatian's idea, or rather his knowledge, the kind of knowledge that walks in from a wider world exactly when a narrow world needs it. The marsh is frozen, he says, frozen hard, a month solid, And a frozen marsh is not a wasteland. A frozen marsh is a road, and out along the channels where the water still moves under the ice, the wild fowl of half of Europe are crowded onto the open leads, starving and stupid with cold, ducks packed wing to wing, and there is fish under the ice for men who know the old ways, and he knows the old ways. He grew up on a lagoon, and so on. A still grey morning, 6 of you go out from the land's edge onto the white plain with sledges, poles, nets, snares, and axe, and the ice takes your weight with a sound you will never forget. A sound like nothing else on earth. A high, glassy, whining boom that runs away from your boots for 100 yards in every direction. The whole frozen sheet talking to itself, and the Dalmatian sees 5 faces go white and says, without stopping, "Good ice is loud ice. It's the quiet ice that drowns you." And you walk on across a booming, pinging, singing floor, out into a horizontal white world where the frozen reeds stand in their millions, each stem furred with hoarfrost, and when the small wind moves through them, they make a sound like the sea heard from far away, a dry, endless, shivering hiss, and your breath freezes on the wool over your mouth, and your eyelashes stick briefly with each blink, and you feel bad even thinking it in a famine winter. One of the most beautiful places you've ever stood. The work is cold beyond anything you've known. Cutting fishing holes through 8 inches of ice with an axe, the chips flying like glass. Your hands inside their wrappings going from ache to burn to a deep, dangerous nothing that the Dalmatian watches for, making you all stop and beat your hands against your thighs on his count, like a drill, like the army, which is where he learned that men lose fingers not to cold but to pride. Setting the horsehair snares along the leads where the ducks walk, lying flat on the ice on a sheepskin at the edge of the open water with a hand net, still as a dead man, for an hour, while the ducks talk themselves closer, the cold of the ice coming up through the sheepskin, and the sheepskin losing the argument inch by inch, your whole front going wooden, and then the Dalmatian's low whistle, and the lunge, the explosion of wings like applause, the freezing spray, and in the net, heavy, furious, unbelievably alive, warmth itself with feathers on it. Fruit. You come back off the marsh at dusk with 19 ducks, a sledge of fish stiffening in the air and reed bundles for the fires, and you personally are so cold that the village warmth hurts, your hands screaming as they thaw by the fire, actual tears standing in your eyes from the pain of your own blood coming home. And it's worth it. It's worth it 19 times over, and the whole village eats bird that week, and the Dalmatian shows the boys how to run the snare line so it can go on all winter. And this is the other face of the terrible year, the one the chronicles skip entirely. A starving province is also 1,000 small ingenuities, 1,000 old skills waking up, marshcraft and woodcraft and grandmothercraft coming down off the shelf. Scarcity is a great remembering. On the way home that first evening in the last light, you cross a line of tracks in the snow on the marsh edge, big, dog-like, purposeful, running straight where dogs wander, and the Dalmatian looks at them for a moment and says one word, wolves, and nothing else. And that night the sheepfold hurdles are doubled, and twice in February you hear them, far off, a sound that goes through the house wall and through the blanket and through the back of your skull into somewhere very old, and the dogs press against the door, and your grandmother says, from her pallet, into the dark, with something almost like satisfaction, "Hard year for everyone." And it's the funniest thing said in that house all winter, and no one laughs louder than the baby who has no idea, God keep her, no idea at all, and go last before we let the year close over to the evenings. Because the evenings are what actually got everyone through, and nobody ever writes them down, because nothing happens in them, and that was the whole point. Picture the house at the bottom of the hunger winter, an hour after the one real meal of the day. The fire is banked low to save wood, a red heart under grey ash, breathing light rather than shedding it, and the room lives inside that small red radius. Beyond it, the corners are night. The animals shift and sigh through the wall, a slow domestic thunder. The wind works at the thatch overhead, fingering the straw, finding nothing, moving on. Your mother spins. That sound is the floor of every evening of your childhood and of this winter above all. The soft whir of the dropped spindle, the pause, the wind on, whir, pause, wind on, hour after hour, wool becoming thread, becoming the future, because spun thread is one of the only things the family can still turn into coin, and her hands do it entirely without her eyes, in the near dark, the fibres drafting between her fingers by touch alone. 40 years of touch, and there is something about watching hands that competent do something that patient, that lowers the heartbeat of everyone in the room. Your father mends, harness tonight, a trace strap, waxed thread and an awl, the leather stiff with cold so he warms each section over the fire before working it. And the smell of warmed leather and beeswax joins the smells of smoke and animals and drying marsh greens, the whole winter perfume of survival. Eustace has the wooden swallow and is walking it along the bench, making it hop, giving it a small voice, and the baby watches the swallow the way you once watched the gold ceiling. And your grandmother tells about the old hungers. This is her season, and everyone knows it. And there's a comfort in her authority that has nothing to do with the content, which is terrible. The year the river took the lower fields, when she was a girl. The soldier winter, when armies ate the province twice, once coming, once going. The grandmother before her, who remembered the sky sign before the great defeat, and the grandmother before that, hunger going back and back, hand to hand like the swallow, and the message of all of it, delivered in her flat, dry, unstoppable old voice, is not that suffering is coming. The message is, we were there. We've always been there. You come from an unbroken line of people who were there, whatever there was, and here you sit, warm enough, alive, the proof of all of them at once. She never says that. She just tells the hungers, one after another, like beads, and the room takes the meaning through the skin. Some nights a neighbour comes, or two, because fires are shared in a wood-short winter. That's just sense, and sense is also company, and the men talk lambing and ditches and the war rumours from the south in voices kept low as if the war could hear, and the women's spindles multiply, whir and pause and whir, and someone always knows a story or a riddle. And there is one night, one particular night that Paulus will carry to his grave, when Faustinus's wife, who has the voice, sings the long song about the fisherman and the drowned girl, all 14 verses in the firelight, to a room packed with tired, hungry people and their sleeping children, and when it ends nobody moves for a while, and the fire ticks, and the wind fingers the thatch, and someone finally sighs, and that sigh is the applause, and it's enough, and everyone goes home through the snow to their own cold beds, a little more able to continue than they were. That's how it was gotten through. Now you know. Not the procession in the end, and not the steward's discipline, and not even the salt, though all of it mattered. Evenings, thread and mended leather and old stories and a wooden bird and other people's breathing in a warm dark room. The year 536 threw the worst sky in recorded history at several million ordinary people, And this was the countermeasure they had, and it held. Write that down somewhere in yourself. Given everything you now know about that year, the countermeasure held, and now the fire is low, and the story is nearly done, and it's time to do what the story was always for. Let it be that night again. Any of those nights. Let it be deep winter, the middle of the dark, the house finally silent. You climb the ladder to the loft on your aching legs, and the rungs are smooth and cold under your cracked hands, and you lie down on the straw tick beside your brother and pull the blanket to your chin, and the straw settles under you with a long whisper, and the cold air stands just above your face like still water, while the warmth builds slowly in the cave of the blanket. Your own warmth, the body's patient fire, fed with barley and beans and stubbornness, still burning, still enough. Below you the animals breathe, long, slow, enormous breaths, brown and old brown, the two warmest citizens of the winter, and the sound comes up through the floorboards like the breathing of the house itself, and it is the oldest lullaby in the world, older than words, animals safe in the dark, and you have heard it every night of your life, and you will hear it every night of your life, and tonight you let yourself really hear it. The wind moves over the thatch and finds nothing. The fire ticks once, twice, settling into its ashes, keeping its red heart from morning. Somewhere very far off, a dog speaks once to the night and thinks better of it. Your body begins to let the day go, and it lets it go the way a hand lets go, one finger at a time. The shoulders first giving up their guard, then the hands uncurling from their gripping shape, going soft against the blanket, the ache in them dimming from a sound to a glow. Then the long muscles of the back laying down their load on the straw, giving your weight to the house, giving the house's weight to the ground, giving the ground to the dark. You're tired enough. You're warm enough. You're safe enough. You have a roof and a fire and your people breathing around you in the dark, all of them. Count the breaths, father, mother, brother, sister, grandmother, all present, all warm, and that's more than the year tried to leave you, and that's enough. It's enough. It's enough. Tomorrow there will be ice to break on the basin. Tomorrow there will be the beast to feed, and the ditch, and the grey sky, and the whole slow work of enduring. But that's tomorrow, and tomorrow is not allowed in here. Right now there is only the blanket's warmth, and the straw's whisper, and the breathing house. Only this, only now. The sounds of the winter night grow fainter. Or maybe you're just listening less. The boundary starts to blur. The good blur. The one your body's been walking toward all day through the frozen furrows. And you stop holding your thoughts up, and they lean and slide and soften into pictures. The gold ceiling breathing its light, the white marsh singing, the swallow hopping along the bench, the loaf on the table with its crust ticking as it cools, your mother's spindle turning, letting out its thread, letting out its long, long thread. Let it come then. Let sleep take you the way it took Paulus in his loft above the oxen 1,500 years ago. Let the world fade. Let the wind have the thatch. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. Centuries will pass. The farm you know will change beyond recognition. The marsh will be drained field by field until the sea itself stands farther off. The causeway will become a road, and the road a highway, and carts will become machines no one in the loft could dream. The wars will end and be forgotten and be replaced. Ravenna's palaces will fall, and her harbours will silt to meadows, and yet the gold ceilings will survive it all. Every cube of glass still at its angle, still breathing light down on upturned faces, and people will cross the world just to stand under them with their mouths open, the way a boy with mud on his leggings once did, and feel exactly what he felt. And the ice will keep the years secret, a mile deep, until people learn to read it, and the trees will keep it in their rings, and so nothing was lost, not really, not even the worst year. It was all written down twice, once in the earth and once in the people, and passed hand to hand like a wooden bird, all the way down the dark to you, because people will still live under this same sun, still plant seed they can't afford to plant, in faith they can't explain, still guard each other's granaries and thaw the hard ground for each other and sing the long song to a quiet room, still glance up on strange lit mornings and ask the sky the old question and take the answer and go to work. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, that doesn't change either. The sun came back, by the way. It always has so far. It will be there in the morning, doing its work, gold on the frost, whether or not anyone deserves it, which was never the arrangement anyway. So let go now. You've erred the whole year, and the year is over, and everyone in the story is warm. Let the noise quiet. Let the light wait for morning. You've earned this rest. The oldest wage there is, and it's yours, and no one can dock it. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.